Add my voice to the voice of welcome to everyone here, whether you're a visitor or a regular. We appreciate you sharing our day together with God. I hope you'll stay for the lunch and the afternoon service and enjoy some time with God's people and in God's presence. Two Christians sat in solemn visitation, the steam of their coffee rising up between them like symbols of the covenant of deep friendship that they shared in Christ. The words grew heavier as one was describing to the other a series of problems and compounding difficulties that arose from those problems. And then the comment was made, I think I may be at about to the end of my rope, and I think I've maxed out on what I can handle. And the other one said, don't say that. Because you might find out there's a lot more that's yet to be and that you can handle more than what you think you can. It wasn't a cynical remark. I know it might sound that way. But it was a realistic warning, like what perhaps can only pass between the best of friends, that reminds us that, sometimes life can get a little nastier than you think it's gonna. And sometimes that straw you think that's going to break the proverbial camel's back has passed a long while back, and we've been adding bags and baskets to the load ever since. Now, the scene I just depicted is not any one particular scene, though I could tweak the details and make it so. It's a representative scene that's passed between people of God for ages. Maybe the beverage wasn't always coffee, poor souls. Some existed before that was discovered. But the moment was always materially the same. Trying to refresh ourselves in one another's company and endure the challenges that life brings. Because life sometimes adds compounding difficulties that make it a challenge, and it comes up to a point where you think you've just about run out of options of figuring out what you can do next to handle this thing the way all these things are supposed to be handled. And then here comes another. And maybe there's an element of drama in the way we're perceiving some of our problems. Maybe they're not as bad as some other person's series of woes, or whatever you want to say about it. But at the end of the day, when it's my load to carry, I've got to figure out how to carry that load. And when I'm feeling like I'm out of options, I've got to figure out what to do when it feels that way. Even if that feeling is exaggerated, even if it's unrealistic, even if whatever. And today's study is about such mounting frustrations. And in the case we're going to look at, it's going to focus in particular on broken relationships, because we're going to follow the story of David. And his story was littered with broken relationships, along with a lot of other problems that amounted to these mounting frustrations. In the text of the morning, Brother Matt read for us from Psalms 18. Psalms 18 is a song that David wrote near the end of his life. It's repeated in the Samuel record, or at least a near version of it is repeated. And it's basically a celebration of what all he went through and how God always restored him and rescued him and kept all of his promises. And, it becomes a story that foreshadows the Messiah. And the tail end of the song applies that saga to the Christ. And it's a very rich song that's beyond the scope of this morning's study, but the opening of that song is just David summarizing his life and how things got rough, and he had a lot of enemies, and it was like that moment I described, two brothers sharing a coffee and a conversation, and David's ultimate, when it felt like he was out of options, it always boiled down to him coming before God with his troubles. Because in those different moments of difficulty in David's life, he had a fundamental set of promises from God that would not be broken. Promises that related to just any faithful Israelite being a faithful child of God, enjoying the blessing of redemption from God through a promised Messiah that was promised in the law. So whatever had been revealed up to that point at David's timeline in human history, he had those promises. He had the promise from God that someday he would be king. He had a promise of an expanding household that goes along with being king. There were things in place that David could lean on. And that's what these verses tell us about him doing, is turning to God in prayer and leaning on God and trusting God. Now, I'd like to review a segment of David's life that I believe this portion of the song is describing, or at least in part. And let's see what brought him to that point where his cry came before God's ears. It all started out next to a battlefield where Goliath was taunting God and the people of God and the armies of Israel and threatening, and it was a very dark scene because the Philistines had the Israelites outmanned, outweaponed, and outnumbered, and on top of that, they had a champion that was willing and ready to fight for all the stakes. And David showed up with supplies for his brothers at his father's directions, and when he got there and perceived what was going on and that Goliath was challenging, y'all just send out your champion, whoever, and we'll fight for all the stakes. Nobody wanted to do that, but David was willing. And so he was there because Dad told him to be there. And he was there to bring food for his brothers because that's how Israel's armies were supplied. And his brother, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was aroused against David and said, "Why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle." Now, there's enough problems going on without Eliab adding to them, but Eliab added to the problems. You've got the problem of the war with the Philistines and being outnumbered, and Saul's, hold on power and sanity was crumbling, and a lot was going wrong. And the last thing we need is a line of false accusations against a kid that was just doing what his dad told him to do. And oh, by the way, he happened to have the faith and the courage to be willing to do what no one else wanted to do, and that's go fight mouthy Goliath. You know, when someone you love and you care about makes this kind of accusation against you, it hurts. We can say all we want about, well, you just got to push through and tune out the white noise and all that, and that's all true. Sometimes you just got to pull yourself together and deal with being hurt, but it still hurts. And that's where we find David in this moment. The ones that he came to serve turning against him and accusing him of just being a prideful brat. Well, you know how the story went. He went out and he did what Eliab wouldn't do. He fought Goliath and he won. But in this moment, what do? Life's problems are beginning to compound. 1 Peter 2:23 says of Jesus, when he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously. And that underscoring of Christ's example, when people made false accusations against him, he just came at his Father's orders to help the people that he was there, and the people he came to serve are the ones that made false accusations against him. You kind of see a parallel there, don't you? And so we find in David's coping mechanism a picture of Christ's coping mechanism. And it's not easy, but this is just the beginning of the trouble. In that old familiar saying about the straw that broke the camel's back, and kind of the little story behind that, we're just starting to load the camel here. David went on and he fought the giant, and we don't find him going back over to Eliab, singing, "How do you like me now?" I mean, you could understand a guy having that urge, but he took the high road, didn't he? And he gave glory to God, and he won the hearts of Israel and found a new set of problems. He went from his brother being mad because he came out there and was willing to fight the giant to his king being mad at him because he did fight the giant and succeeded. In celebration of David's victory, the women sang as they danced and said, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000. Oops. Now what do? You've outshined the king. And Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him. And he said, they've described to David 10,000. Me, they've ascribed only thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom? So Saul eyed David from that day forward. So David went from his oldest brother saying, you're just out here because you're prideful and naughty, to the king saying, you're out here because you're trying to take over the throne. He can't win. No matter what he does, people are against him. Not just random people, but people close to you that you've loved all your life. Your brother. And the king whom you admire and respect and want to support and uphold and serve and help. Powerful people that can give you a lot of problems. Oh, there was some good news sprinkled in. He found a new friend. The king's son, Jonathan, and they became close friends, fast. But because of Saul's unrighteous anger at David and his ungodly suspicions of David, things got pretty complicated and problems heaped upon heaped, and before long he had to leave the household. He could no longer be with his king. He could no longer be with his new bride, the king's daughter. He could no longer be with his best friend, Jonathan. He couldn't afford to go back and see his family because the king was after him, trying to kill him. Had spies everywhere looking for him. David's life spiraled in a hurry. You know, the Bible teaches us that others may envy us just for hard work and skill. And the reason I'm throwing this in here is to give us a sense of the kind of frustration that's going to well up in a heart that's enduring this. Because people aren't hating David for mistakes he's made. They're hating him because he did the right thing. And it gets to this point, you're just like, I can't win for losing. And I know sometimes those problems aren't people problems. Sometimes it's a flat tire or a blown transmission or a bill you can't pay or something different, okay? In this case, it was people problems. And the nature of it just adds to the exasperating feeling of mounting frustration. Romans 12, verse 17 through 19 teaches us how to act in such cases. Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. David could have followed after a course of trying to get revenge and strike out at the house of Saul or something like that. But instead, he made every measure to make every appeal to try to be at peace with Saul and try to get along. And when things were just too rough, he got out of Dodge. And he'd sneak back in and talk to Jonathan in secret. And what's the temperature of the household? How are things going? And well, I'm afraid it's worse than we originally thought. And so, they're out to kill you. And it just... But he just wouldn't give up trying, to do the right thing. Sometimes problems in life are like that. And again, it may not be people problems. It may be a different kind of problem. But you look for scriptural guidance when you're facing problems and mounting frustrations. And the idea that these problems sometimes get worse makes us wonder, well, does that mean I'm doing the right thing? And we need to understand, when there is this growing sense of we're running out of options, we need to understand that we might do everything as best we can, and that doesn't guarantee that the problems are going to go away. I'm sorry. I don't want that to hurt you or discourage you. I don't want to be that guy, and someone right now is saying, well, he's cynical. You go on and tell me I'm cynical, but sometimes it's that way. You can get it right and do your best, and this passage warns us, you just got to do the part that depends on you. In particular, when it's a broken relationship. But even if it's other kinds of problems, you just got to do the best you can do to do the right thing. And you can line up a lot of really good choices and get them stacked up in a row, waiting for the dominoes to fall and yield the great fruit of life just got better. And sometimes it works that way, and sometimes something else goes wrong. But David just kept trying. And his efforts led him into exile in the wilderness. And there he and his men crouched in the back of the cave, hiding, trying to avoid being discovered, because King Saul's forces were nearby and they were looking for him, and they had killing him on their mind. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, they kept getting worse. And David and his friends whispered in secrecy. David's like, I can't kill him. He's the Lord's anointed. He's the king. I mean, we've got to respect the office, and I've got to be loyal to him. And this isn't right. And his friends are like, this is a sign from God. God's delivered him into your hands. Are you crazy? Sneak up on him and kill him right now, because Saul had snuck into the cave, into the edge of the cave to tend to nature's business, the narrative tells us. And so he's vulnerable. And instead of doing that, killing him, he could have. It had been easy. And you could kind of make a case for it. David put together another good choice. Now, I know we could go through parts of this narrative and nitpick David and find mistakes he made through all this. I know that. But this is where he made an uncommonly noble choice. Instead of killing him, he just cut the edge of his road and slipped back and waited until Saul was up and out. And David arose afterward and went out of the cave and called out to Saul, saying, "My Lord the king." And when Saul looked behind him, David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed down. And David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of men who say, indeed, David seeks your harm?" Against all odds and any reasonable hope, David's still trying to fix things that are broken. Sometimes you do this not because you're convinced it's going to work. You do it because you know that's what God wants you to do. Okay? And that's what David is doing here. What's curious is, even after restraining his hand and not killing Saul, but instead just cutting the edge of his garment, by this point, his conscience is so sensitive, he kind of hurt his own feelings cutting the robe. He thought, man, I messed up. I shouldn't have even done that. And he's apologetic for that. Can we all just be real with each other as the steam of coffee rises up between us? Are you going to bow down to that guy with your face in the dirt? I don't even do that with my wife when she's mad at me. She doesn't get that mad. Are you going to feel guilty for cutting his robe? Look, guys, I'd love to tell you that I'm above this, but I'm just going to confess to everybody. I would be taunting with that robe and look what I have, and do I feel guilty? No. This isn't a symbol of my guilt. This is a symbol of how wrong you've been. I'm just telling you where our emotions can take us. And those kind of things don't make things better. Okay? That's not part of the kind of precepts that underscore a God-honoring effort to solve people problems or other kinds of problems besides people problems. So I'm looking at this, and here's the idea I'm trying to get us to grasp. I see in David's conduct just an unbelievable strength. I'm reading this narrative thinking, how did he do that? He did it. Look, this day your eyes have seen that the Lord delivered you today into my hand in the cave, and someone urged me to kill you, but my eye spared you. And I said, I will not stretch out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. Moreover, my father, see, yes, see the corner of your robe in my hand, for I cut off the corner of your robe and did not kill you. Know and see that there is neither evil nor rebellion in my hand, and I have not sinned against you, yet you hunt my life to take it. He made his case, but all the while he maintained a posture of humility, of honoring Saul, of demonstrating his loyalty to Saul, and all that could be said about this very beautiful speech. So it was when David had finished speaking these words to Saul that Saul said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. Then he said to David, "You're more righteous than I, for you have rewarded me with good, whereas I have rewarded you with evil. And you've shown this day how you have dealt with me. For when the Lord delivered me into your hand, you did not kill me. For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him get away safely? Therefore may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day." Sigh out all the tension. Things just got better, right? He's lying. Maybe he tried to mean it. But you better watch out. Proverbs warns, "He who hates disguises it with his lips and lays up deceit within himself. And when he speaks kindly, do not believe him. For there are 7 abominations in his heart." The scriptures warn us about being gullible when someone's fruit displays such evil intent. David couldn't afford to be gullible, because it's not just about his willingness to risk himself and say, "Okay, I'm going to take a gamble and trust Saul that he's being honest here." If he takes that risk, he's exposing to great danger, perhaps even death, all those friends who trusted him for good leadership. And in the wake of those sweet-sounding words to Saul, he kept trying to find David and kill him. The integrity of the upright one will guide them, but the perversity of the unfaithful will destroy them. What do you do? Well, I want to trust. It's not just the risk you bring upon yourself. If you unwisely trust these sweet-sounding words, you're taking other lives into your hand, and you're putting them at great peril. You have no right to do that to them, okay? Well, how do I treat Saul? What's the way? Which way do I turn? I mean, it's like you're playing three-dimensional chess, and your opponent is the devil, and he just made a killer move. And you have no way out. And you can't figure out what is the right thing to do. You ever have those problems in mounting troubles and broken relationships and things going wrong, and the washing machine isn't running the spin cycle correctly, and your team just lost a football game, and someone says, "Don't tell yourself it can't get any worse"? What do you do? Proverbs 11:3 informs us that there are core principles of integrity. And sometimes when we can't figure out what specifically to do in a specific thing, we have to, I'm going to use this language, we have to retreat behind a wall of general principles and try to make choices that honor these principles of, love and forgiveness and forbearance and caring for others and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes there's a lot of tension in that, because on the one hand, David's got to love Saul, and that sounds like maybe he should trust him. But on the other hand, David's got to love his companions, and that means you better not trust Saul. His fruit shows he is a liar. And Saul had a lot of liars in his ear telling him, David's trying to supplant the throne. You gather that in going through the several chapters here in 1 Samuel. And David knew all that. He had figured that out, and Jonathan had talked to David about it. And, so he can't, I got to love Saul, but I also got to love these other people. It's kind of like Tony and I are talking about. Sometimes you get to a point in traffic and it's jammed up and somebody over here is trying to turn out and cross you and go left and go back the other way. And it's like they have placed their hopes in a lost cause. And somebody's going to be nice. Hey, that's great. And let them come out. Well, this happened to us the other day. Somebody come out and parked right there waiting for someone on that side to be nice. And so in an effort to be nice to one person, someone made a choice that hurt a row of people behind us and caused a huge traffic jam. So on the one hand, yeah, you want to do the right thing and be polite, sure. But on the other hand, you've just done a disservice to a lot of people. One of them back there may be running their flashers trying to get to the ER. I mean, you got to think about that stuff. And I'm just giving you that as a simple sort of a benign story to kind of illustrate. It's not always easy to figure it out. So you back up and you look for the general principles that guide us in life, and you try to measure every choice against those principles. And I'm just going to tell you, you're not always going to get it right. Just get as close as you can. Like I said, we could back up through this story and walk through it. Somebody call me and let's set up a study at the house and we'll get together and do this sometime. Let's just go through the narrative and just nitpick David and find every mistake we think that he might have made. You could do that and you could stack them up deep. Yet we back away and we see a guy that's doing everything he can do. Here's the problem. In life, we sometimes encounter the nitpickers. And you're over here in emotional and moral turmoil trying to do the right thing. And here comes the voice of the nitpickers just adding to the proverbial load. Go back and think about David. Just trying to do the right thing that serves the most good. And at the end of the day, he was keeping honoring God and the greater cause of God's people in his mind. And okay. So David later confronts Saul again. Another kind of a sneak up on him type moment. 1 Samuel 26:17, Saul knew David's voice and said, is that your voice, my son David? And David said, it is my voice, my Lord, O king. And he said, why does my Lord thus pursue his servant? For what have I done, and what evil is in my hand? Now therefore, please, let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, let him accept an offering. But if it is the children of men, may they be cursed before the Lord. For they have driven me out this day from sharing in the inheritance before the Lord, of the Lord, saying, go serve other gods. So now, do not let my blood fall to the earth before the face of the Lord. For the king of Israel has come out to seek a flea, as when one hunts a partridge in the mountains. Then Saul said, I have sinned. Return, my son, for I will harm you no more, because my life is precious in your eyes this day. Indeed, I have played the fool and erred exceedingly. So again, you think the problems are solved? He's still the guy that David can't afford to trust. What do you do? And look at what David is doing to try to fix it. He refers to himself as a flea. I don't know exactly when this practice started, but by the first century, the Jews strained their fruit juice beverages like grape juice to make sure they got the fleas out of it, or any kind of a little fruit fly or something, because in their mentality, that's just the filthiest animal. Well, I kind of get it. I don't like them either. So David is very humbling and lowering himself and pleading and insisting, and he's like he's grabbing every decent option he can find behind that wall of general principles. And one of those options is humility. Okay, that can't be wrong. I'll grab the humility and we'll ride that horse for a while. We find Paul talking about this kind of concept in 1 Corinthians 4, verse 12 and 13, when he said, we labor working with our own hands, being reviled, that's people speaking against him, we bless. That's what David did, wasn't it? Being persecuted, we endure. That's what David did. being defamed, we entreat. When someone runs us down and falsely accuses us, we just try to plead our cause. We have been made as the filth of the world, the offscouring of all things until now. Does that sound dramatic? Well, when you know the things Paul went through, I mean, it's not really dramatic. People were after him and they, tried to stone him. They tried to kill him. A whole lot of things had gone on. And as if the people problems wasn't enough, he had gone through some shipwreck, more than once. There were times he didn't have, the abundance to eat and live in any kind of comfort at all. He didn't have a family to lean on. I mean, there was a lot of things that were wrong. And things were mounting and frustrations were mounting. And what do I do now? And oh no, here comes another curveball and I've already got 10 strikes. You just back up behind that wall of general godly principles and do the best you can to make choices. And you measure every decision you're making against those concepts. David's troubles continued to mount. There's another growing problem that was happening simultaneous with all of this. I've categorized this as problems with his associates. I'm just for time's sake, I'm leaving out the fact that Jonathan was his closest friend, and it reached the point David just couldn't see him anymore. They had parted one another's company, and there is in David's heart this idea: I may never see him again. And I mean, this is my bud. He can't be with his family. He can't be with his wife. He can't be with his brother-in-law and best friend. He can't enjoy the peace and acceptance of his father-in-law's table, which was also his king. And now his countrymen are turning against him. These are the people that he served. David's the reason these guys weren't under the Philistine whip. David fought the Philistine champion when these people wouldn't. So here's how they thanked him. The Ziphites came up to Saul at Gibeah, saying, is David not hiding with us in the strongholds in the woods, in the hill of Hachilah, which is on the south of Jeshimon? Now therefore, O king, come down according to the desire of your soul to come down, and our part shall be to deliver him into the king's hand. And Saul said, blessed are you of the Lord, for you've had compassion on me. Please go and find out for sure and see the place where his hideout is and who has seen him there, for I am told he is very crafty. So again, Saul had people in his ear lying to him. Oh, you got to watch old Dave, he's crafty. And David's own countrymen are turning against him, people that he risked his life to serve, and then stepped out of the limelight and said, the glory is God. Saul, go lead them. Be their king. And those people were turning against him. And he's got to deal with that. He knows this kind of stuff is happening. That's why he's hiding. And he's got to deal with that along with all these other mounting frustrations that we've been talking about. And so you can kind of see where he got to the point where he thought, maybe the Philistines are my best option. Look, if we're going to go nitpick Dave, that's going to be one I'm going to say, look, you can't do that. They had been the enemy. They were the ones he had fought successfully against. And he's like, everybody else against me. I can't have anything else. Maybe they'll accept me. 1 Samuel 27, David said in his heart, now I shall perish someday by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me that I should speedily escape to the land of the Philistines, and Saul will despair of me to seek me any more in any part of Israel, so I shall escape out of his hand. Then David arose and went over with 600 men who were with him to Achish, the son of Maoch, king of Gath. So he's thinking, I'll go to Philistia, I'll kind of kill time, I'll get in a holding pattern, and we'll wait this thing out, and after a while Saul will get tired of it, and then I can come home. He's not trying to betray Israel. It kind of looks like that. He's not trying to turn against them by going to the hated enemy. It's starting to feel like he's out of options. When this looks like your best choice, I'm going to tell you what, you're at the bottom. When you look at the Dagon worshiping Philistines as your best option, you're in a world of hurt. The only problem is David just thinks he's at the bottom. We ain't found the bottom yet. He spent some time there, but after a while, things are pretty restless. And David's about to get fired. Achish called David and said to him, surely, what'd we do? Surely as the Lord lives, you have been upright, and your going out and coming in with me in the army is good in my sight. For to this day I have not found evil in you, since in the day of your coming to me. Nevertheless, the Lord's do not favor you. Therefore return now and go in peace, that you may not displease the lords of the Philistines. So David said to Achish, but what have I done? And to this day, what have you found in your servant, as long as I've been with you, that I may not go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king? Then Achish answered and said to David, I know you're as good as in my sight as an angel of God. Nevertheless, the princes of the Philistines have said, he shall not go up with us to the battle. Now therefore rise up early in the morning with your master's servants who have come with you, and as soon as you're up early in the morning and have light, depart. You're fired. Why? Oh, there's no reason. You've been a great employee. I mean, I've gotten compliments from bosses before, but I've never had one tell me, you're just like an angel of God amongst us. If any of y'all have had that, hey, good for you. You've been great. Get out. Really? We better pour another cup of coffee. Because I'm just going to tell you, we ain't found the bottom yet. While all this was going on and David was feeling rejected, he did what a person ought to do when life is mistreating you and things get rough. You find somebody that needs to be loved and you love them. And I'm telling you, there's medicine in that. You back up in the story and you find that's what David did. Everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was contented gathered to him, so he became captain over them, and there were about 400 men with him. Apparently that number grew from early in the story to later in the story, because we had 600 when he went to Philistia. So David is taking in all the ragtag refugees that nobody wants, and he's loving them up, and he's giving them a home and a group of people to belong to. You know, maybe they can't have their families, maybe they can't have their hometown, maybe they can't. Maybe they've got a lot of problems that aren't too dissimilar to David's problems. So life is treating me, so I'm going to get behind this wall of general principles, and you know what? I'm going to love the unlovable. And I'm going to gather in the rejected. And I'm going to give them a group to belong to, and a sense of belonging, and a sense of being loved and cherished and respected and protected. And I'll put my life at risk to protect them. Romans 12:16 says, be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. He's right in line, isn't he, with grabbing those general principles and saying, we're just going to do the best we can to make solid choices. What is desired in a man is kindness, and a poor man is better than a liar. These guys were poor, but they made better friends than Saul. Saul was wealthy and powerful. Saul was bribing people to try to reveal David's whereabouts. He had all the cards in his hand. He had all the advantages. From an earthly point of view, it looks like he's the guy you want on your side. And David saw through that and said, these ragtag, rabble, ruffian guys make better friends than that dishonest king who will lie when the truth would serve him better. And so he's checking all the boxes. I mean, come on, y'all. He's getting it right. Something's got to fall in place somewhere along the way. Doesn't it? Well, it's all fun and games till you come back to Philistia and find your family's been kidnapped and your stuff's been stolen. 1 Samuel 30 with verse 1. Now it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day that the Amalekites had invaded the south and attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire, and had taken captives the women and those who were with them, who were there, from small to great. They did not kill anyone, but carried them away and went their way. So David and his men came to the city, and there it was burned with fire. And their wives and their sons and their daughters had been taken captive. And then David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had been taken captive. Really? Not Abigail. Anybody who can read 1 Samuel 25 and not love that woman, I don't know, man. She was a keeper. Humble, serving, loving, beautiful, just all the things. Gone. The other wife, gone. All your stuff, gone. You come in from a hard stretch, and you know what you find? You find comfort in your kids. My kids don't understand how much medicine is in their hugs. You just soak it up. And I can see David just got fired by the Philistines, kicking rocks as he's coming home, thinking, well, we're going to walk through the gates of the town, and I'm going to hear some little voice holler, Daddy! And they're going to come running, and that's going to feel so right. And in the distance, you see the smoke of the city rising up before you. And as the smoke rises, your heart sinks. And a growing fear in your mind becomes an unbearable reality. They're gone. And as if that wasn't bad enough, it's the Amalekites who did it. And if Saul had done his job way back earlier in the book, they all wouldn't even be here now. So he's got a lot to be mad about, doesn't he? Here's you a good chance to say, I knew I shouldn't have been supportive of that king. Now I'm having to bear the brunt of his dumb decisions and his failures, and I'm sick and tired of all this. He's better than me. David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every one for his sons and his daughters. The ragtag rabble that he loved when no one else would. The last thing he had. I can't have Jonathan. I can't have my father-in-law. I can't have my family. I can't have my brothers. I can't have my hometown. I can't have the sheep I used to care for. I can't have my best friend. I don't even know if I'll ever see him again. It's all gone. And now these people that didn't deserve to be loved, I've loved them. I've given them everything I had to give. And that wasn't much, I know. But whatever I had, I emptied my pockets for them. And they're all arguing over who gets to throw the first rock. I think we found rock bottom. Now what do? David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. That's Psalms 18 in verse 6 right there, you people. That's a broken man beaten down at the end of Satan's blade, worn out beyond all reckoning or contemplation, thinking that he's suffered the worst. And if there's any way left to hurt him, he can't quite think of what it might be. And he has one more choice to make, and that choice is he can lean on God. We could focus from now till the cows come home on everything David was losing and had lost at this point. But you know what he still had? He still had something at the beginning of the story. He had those promises from God. Those promises to redeem the faithful. those promises to reward his servants at the end of this life and in eternity. A reward that does not last for a momentary gratification of solving life's problem, but an eternal joy. He had those promises. And he had the promise that one day he would be king. And all while this was all going on, and it looked so dark, and it felt so dark, and it seemed so hopeless, and it's like, can anything else go wrong? And someone said, don't say that. In the background, as the story took its turns, eyes seen only by heaven, the events seen only by heaven's eyes, the turn of the story was setting the stage for those promises to be fulfilled and David to become king. We're one chapter away from that, y'all. When it seems you're out of options, you still have the promises from God. Not that all your problems in this life are going to go away. I wish they would too. But you have promises that are eternal in nature. So we wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. Recently, I was visiting with a young man about courage. And it reminded him of what I suppose most of us have heard. Courage is not about learning how to not feel afraid. Courage is about learning how to do it anyway. How to just stand up and take another step. But I've got 10 steps left on my journey, and I can't take those 10 steps. Then take the next one. But all this has gone back here and it's gone wrong, but you still have the promises of God. So when it seems you're out of options, you just have the courage. And that means you feel afraid while taking the next step. And depending on God and trusting him with an unwavering faith to keep all those promises that he's made. To be sure to be the people that will be blessed in accordance with those promises. If that's where you're at right now in life, I want to encourage you to have the courage. And that means act in spite of your fear and take that next step closer to God.